Hi guys, and welcome back to F the Noise with your host Lauren Fiorenza Gill. I am so excited to be back for episode number 2 of this podcast. And this week's topic, we are going to talk all things fertility, freezing your eggs, what fertility treatment even looks like, and what I felt after I did the fertility treatment, because no one talks about these things. And these are things that I wish someone had told me before I did my fertility treatment. It's so good to have you here, and let's jump in. So the way the conversation went when I was talking about fertility and first presented even with the idea of freezing my eggs, bearing in mind I'm 24 at this age, I have no idea what that really means and looks like. And I don't know what's involved in fertility. I don't know how long it takes. I don't know, does it hurt? Am I going to be in pain for a long period of time? Is this even going to guarantee that I have children in the future? At 24, especially going through, being told that I've got cancer, this is just feeling like another thing adding to my list of things to worry about. And so originally, I remember going for the meeting with my doctor, and he was telling me about the different types of chemotherapy. And in that meeting, it was very much like a general chit chat. It was like, these are 2 options for your type of cancer. These are the pros, these are the cons. Which one do you want? This is kind of like pick and mix if you want to make it fun. And then the second stage is then talking about children in the future. And this big word fertility comes up. And I'm 24 at this point. I've not got a full serious boyfriend. I don't know if I want kids in the future. There's just a lot of uncertainty and things that I've just never thought about as a 24-year-old woman. I myself have never been that kind of girl that dreams of having like a family in the future and, the white picket fence and the marriage. Like, these are just things that I've never really prioritized in my life. And it's not that to say that I don't want that. It's just to say that I've just never had the kind of dreams and visions of that in the future. So for me, when I'd chosen my chemotherapy, which is mentioned in the last one, I chose the BCOP option for my Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer. I then got presented with the option that I wasn't really expecting of, okay, you've chosen the strongest chemotherapy. It's the most intense short course of chemotherapy. With that, one of the biggest side effects is fertility, not being able to have children in the future. And the chemotherapy, like a lot of them, does come with that risk, as quite a lot of us know. And so when he asked me that, he said, have you ever thought about having kids? I said, no. He's like, would you ever think about having fertility? It's a good option for your future self. And I just remember thinking, no, I'm okay, thank you. But thank you for asking. And that's literally what I said. And his face looked really shocked. He looked at me like, okay, how do I rephrase this to a girl who really isn't like thinking in the clearest of minds right now? And at the time I wasn't. Also, I'm just caveating that there really is no right or wrong answer in this. This is just my own personal experience and journey with fertility that I'm going to talk about today. But some people might know at that age of 24 that kids is just not on the radar. And that is, I really want to emphasize, totally fine. I just hadn't really thought about it. And even that little glimpse of actually, I could see myself having kids in the future, that was enough to prompt the consultant to say, let's just chat about this a little bit more than a black and white no. Like, let me educate you about what fertility treatment is, what happens. Let me talk about the chemotherapy a little bit more to just really kind of emphasize on the increased risk of not being able to have kids. And so I'm really grateful that I had such an amazing consultant, because he turned around and he said to me, if I'm not going to put words in your mouth and I don't want to sway your decision, every answer as mentioned is right. But if you were my daughter at 24 years old and my daughter was going through this, I would highly encourage her to have the option. And I'm someone who is always open to both sides of a story. So when he said have the option, I thought, yeah, I mean, why would I want to get rid of an option to have children if I can do this treatment, and I'm fortunate enough to do this treatment now before I start chemo? And so that's really what swayed me. He was talking about the chemotherapy and it being so intense, and how I wouldn't be able to undo the option of saying no after I'd started. It's not like I could reverse it and then say, actually I changed my mind. So the decision to freeze my eggs was a really great idea looking back, because the guy that I actually started dating a few weeks before I was told that I had cancer is now my nearly 6-year relationship. And if I hadn't have said yes to having my eggs frozen, I might not even have the option to have children in the future with my current partner, because I wouldn't have given myself that option. I would always kind of recommend just looking at two sides of the story. Like, what if you did freeze them? You just don't use them. That's one of the things. Or you can give them to somebody else, you know, like there's so many different options with freezing the eggs. And so I feel a lot less stressed. You know, life post-cancer, and we'll talk about this in future episodes, is a map, and a very complicated map to navigate. And there's a lot of highs and a lot of lows and a lot of unknowns. And so the one thing that I can say I'm really happy I did is freeze my eggs, because that just ticks something off the list, and it's just something I don't even have to think about. Like, even being 30 now, I don't feel the pressure personally of needing to have kids in the next few years, and it really makes me feel that I could just like live my best life, drive my career, travel the world, and I just don't feel that stress. And this conversation that we're having about fertility really is for anyone and everyone, not just people going through chemo and cancer, but you know, how many times do we chat to our friends in the 30s age bracket of like, oh, you know, do you think you'd have kids in the future? Or is that something that you just like in the modern day not even interested in having? Like, is it just you and your partner, or is it just you? Or, you know, do you want to get a surrogate, or do you want to adopt? Like, there's so many options in this day and age that I just feel like we're in a beautiful place with having options to have a child, and also having options to not have a child. So I love this freedom of just exploring options and really like choosing what works for you in terms of being a parent in the future and not being a parent. So when I talk about fertility in this podcast, it's my personal journey at the age of 24 and that decision making before I did my chemotherapy. But what I'm about to say in terms of the fertility treatment is and can be applied to anyone really, considering IVF for fertility. So let's jump right in. So I had my fertility treatment and was recommended by the NHS and my cancer consultant to go to a place called Nurture Fertility in Nottingham. And I just want to shout a huge thank you and send so much gratitude to Nurture Fertility Clinic, because they really helped make this journey of the unknown fertility treatment so easy to navigate. And they were super warm and welcoming when I arrived. I took my mum for my first one. I think my sister might have come as well. I normally brought the squad to different appointments, like fertility appointments. And I just remember going in and just being offered, do you want a cup of tea? There's some magazines on the side. There's a little water fountain here. Here's some biscuits. And it just feeling like really warm and welcoming. And I think that's what I would hope to see in a fertility clinic, because it's such a tricky reason why people go to fertility clinics, right? Like, some people go because they can't have children and this is their last resort. Some people go like myself because we're about to start chemotherapy and we're getting our eggs frozen as a backup for the future. So there's so many different options and everyone's in their own stage and journey in fertility. And I think just having that warm embrace as I walked in by the staff was amazing. So shout out to Nurture Fertility Clinic. So my personal journey with getting my eggs frozen in fertility treatment lasted about 2 to 2.5 weeks. It started by going in, being welcomed with warm open arms, and then we did a blood test, and then they do the ovarian scan. So they stick a little camera up inside you, if you know what I mean, and then they basically scan the ovaries as they currently are, just to see the condition, just to see what it all looks like inside. And then from there, they then decide kind of the plan that you're on, and they'll assess the date of your chemo starting, and then they'll work within that time frame that you've got, which is great because it felt like all the deadlines and timings and all of that could just be dealt with between my consultant and them direct. And all I had to do is show up. So showing up for my fertility treatment at the start was quite challenging for me because, you know, I was kind of in this waiting game of my cancer results. Then I got diagnosed and it just felt like another appointment, to be honest, even though what was happening in that appointment was actually something that I would thank my younger self for doing. I didn't see that at the time. It just felt like another appointment. The appointments were quite demanding for me. So I had to go in 3 to 4 times, I think, in the first week or 2 weeks. It was quite a lot. It was quite a lot of commitment. My mum didn't have a car. I didn't have a car at the time. I don't think my sister had a car. So we had to rely on a lot of people. And this is truly where I just say thank you to everyone that supported me and my family during that time, because I had like my auntie that I hadn't seen in ages, like come and give us a lift to the clinic and wait for us in the car and then give us a lift back. And it was just these little gestures of like, I've got you, which really helps. I can't tell you how much it helps. And it was comfort for my mum when I went in for my scan. It was someone to talk to after. And it just was that kind of like feeling of normality still in this whirlwind of appointments. And the second thing that made this whole fertility treatment quite challenging for me at the beginning, before I found my flow, and I did find my flow with it, where it kind of didn't become like multiple tedious doctor's appointments. It became like a really beautiful part of my life that I could actually have control over, was just the needles. Like, and please fast forward a few minutes if you aren't liking needles. I'm not going to get graphic or anything, but it was just the amount of needles that, you know, you get probed and probed, and it's happening 3 to 4 times a week naturally, because what they need to do is they need to check your bloods, make sure everything's okay there, and then each time you go in 3 to 4 days a week, you have a scan, and it's to see how the ovaries are, just triple checking everything's fine. And so that's like in the first week. And, you know, at first I was quite resistant. I was like, here we go again, we've got to go back. And then when anything becomes like a routine and you've got to go and you've got to commit, you suddenly find your little ways to enjoy it. So, you know, me and my mum would be excited to go and use that time to have a catch up and a coffee before, and we'd read little magazines and see what the new latest fashion is while we were waiting, and we made friends with the staff. And if you can just turn what feels like quite a tedious situation into like almost romanticizing it and making it something that you look forward to, it changes everything. Your mental capacity to take on all these appointments, your physical strength to take yourself there, your emotional stability, like everything just feels more grounded when you can find little joys in things that don't feel exciting in the moment. So that's my tip if anyone is going through this and it feels just like never ending. Just see if you can like twist it a little bit and see what would make it fun for you, because it does change the whole experience. So I can say that my personal experience was really nice because I did that. So we had the first week, which was 3 to 4 appointments a week, and that was blood tests and scans. Then you become your own nurse, essentially. So you have a designated nurse that works with you throughout the whole time, or I did at least. And then what we did was she would give me these injections. And these are injections that you just put into your lower tummy, and it's just one, I think it's one a day at a certain time. So you pick whatever time works for you, and then you inject yourself in your lower tummy once a day. And I think I did that for about a week and a half. And so again, to make it fun and not tedious, and I knew I was starting chemo in about 2.5 weeks after I started the injections, me, my dad and my sister decided to go to Barcelona. And so you bet I was injecting myself in the hotel room. That sounds really bad, but I was doing my fertility treatment in my hotel room. It just made the whole thing, you know, my sister was there. She'd come up with me at the time, I think it was like 5 o'clock or something. So before dinner when we were getting ready, and she'd be like, do you need any help? I said, no, I'm all good. And you can get someone to help you. So a family friend, a relative, your partner, to inject it for you. And I do know several girls that actually had that done who I met during chemo because they didn't want to do the injections themselves. So there is the option. But for me personally, like I just really had this thing from the start of my chemo cancer treatment to just like take control wherever I could. So for me to learn and get over my fear of needles and to inject myself, it was scary at first, but then it felt like drinking water. Like it felt that easy when you get used to it. And the first injection that you do for the first week is actually not that bad because the needle's so thin you actually don't feel it, or I didn't personally feel it. So the purpose of this first injection is to basically make the follicles in your ovaries build, and that essentially makes the eggs grow. And so that's why you do it for that week, a week and a half period. And then after this course I got moved on to my second injection, which is actually when I was back in the UK. And this one really feels like you're a nurse because you're getting these little bottles of liquid, and you have to like take the lid off, you have to put it in the injection, you got got to mix it up a little bit. You really do feel like a doctor, and it feels really cool because you're like, look what I can do. And so that was the second injection that you also do with your first injection. So you inject your first one on the same side that you've been doing it on, and just to balance it out and reduce bruising, you do the second one on the other side of your lower tummy. And so I think I did both of those injections at the same time for roughly like half a week to a week. I can't remember the exact time frame, but it was about that time. You don't really have to worry about the times and the duration because everything is set by the nurse. Like you have a plan. I think I even had maybe like an app or something, and it was basically a little portal app where I basically ticked off each time I'd done the treatment. Once that cycle's done with the 2 injections, you then basically are having regular checkups. The nurse and doctor's looking at your follicles, seeing how they're building, seeing how the eggs are growing. And then they'll tell you when you're in a place to do the final 1 injection. You move on to the big one. And this one was called Cetrotide. It's given to women like myself at the time who are having ovarian stimulation, which is basically going through fertility treatment to produce lots of eggs, hopefully. So that's what Cetrotide is. You take it the day before you get your egg retrieval operation. And it's really easy because the nurse basically tells you when you're ready to take it. And then you fast forward to the next day when you're back in the fertility clinic. And honestly, for me at that point, before I went in for the operation, it felt really surreal because this whole journey had taken about 2.5 weeks from the time that I'd gone in knowing nothing to having been a doctor, injecting myself, mixing the formulas, getting all these amazing like blood scans and tests to see how my follicles are growing in my ovaries, to then literally getting them retrieved. And so I did have a little bit of nervousness with it because although the scan showed that I had quite a few and they look quite healthy, the follicles, you just never know. And so basically they gown you up on the day of retrieval. You can't eat 6 hours before or drink 2 hours before. So I was pretty hungry, but needs must. And then they basically gown you up and I was put under anesthetic, and the whole egg retrieval took, I think it was 20 to 25 minutes. It was super fast, but I was knocked out, to be honest. And I remember that after the operation, I just felt so much lighter, less swollen and bloated, less achy. And then I just remember waking up and just feeling a little bit drowsy, not really remembering where I was. And I was starving. And so my mum had got like all these snacks, like increased my blood sugar levels, like granola cereal, a little protein bar, some water. I just remember, being there, waking up, and the nurse came straight in and she's like, it's all done. And I was like, is that it? And she said, yeah. And so I asked them the question that had been on my mind, obviously, from starting this treatment. And the goal was to get eggs from the fertility treatment. And I said, how many eggs did I get from my fertility treatment and extraction? And she said, you got 37. And it felt like a big number. And to be fair, in the context of retrieving eggs, the average amount of eggs that normally get retrieved is about 13 to 15. And so I realized very quickly that I had overproduced. And so I was like, oh my gosh, 37 eggs, that's amazing. And then the next stage after they've retrieved them is, let's see how many we can actually freeze, because not all can be healthy. And so then I was told that 33 out of 37 could be frozen, which is amazing news, obviously, because I was just about to go into chemo. I might not even be able to have kids in the future if I wanted them. And so to know that I had 33 eggs on ice was a big relief for me. But then I had some really serious side effects later after the eggs had been retrieved. Because I had overproduced, something happened to me called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And basically, I just was in so much pain the day after. And for about a week, I looked about 4 months pregnant. Like my tummy was so swollen. It literally it had a bump, and it looked like I was pregnant. It was sore. I felt dizzy. I felt completely like my energy had been zapped. So although getting the eggs was amazing, the kind of after effect of the overstimulation is something that I would just flag to people, because no one told me that that is even a thing, that you can produce a lot more than the average, and B, the side effects that comes with it. Just be aware that you might need some time off work if you're planning on going back to work and you haven't got chemotherapy the next week, and this is part of an IVF journey. Just bear that in mind, because it took me about a week and a half to get back to normal. And then my stomach began calming down after that. I really nourished myself with good food. I drank loads of water and I just rested. And then that is pretty much the fertility journey of what happened from start to finish, from even hearing about the word and not really knowing what that meant, what that looked like, if it hurt or not, to then basically being my own doctor, mixing my own cocktail of fertility treatment and injecting myself. Like, I never thought I would get to that place when I was first told about fertility treatment. And I do want to stress that this is such a personal experience, and I'm not here to say everyone go do it, because it's just not for everyone, and I totally understand that. But in the context of this podcast being a cancer podcast where we talk about everything, it's unfiltered, we ask the questions that feel silly. Personally, for me, I felt very young and naive at 24 to have said just no to fertility treatment, just because I didn't have a boyfriend and I didn't know if I really wanted kids in the future. It's just so good to have that option. And like I say, this is a very personal preference, but I'm really glad I did it, because I can really sit here as a 30-year-old woman with the same guy that I met a few weeks before I was diagnosed with cancer and say that I could possibly want kids in the future now. It's a little bit kind of like, you know, the older you get, the more you think about these things. Is it on my radar now? No. Do I see it happening in the near future? Not really. Do I feel like I've got quite a bit more to do with my career and my life and adventure? Yeah. And I don't feel any guilt saying that. Like, some people might have a deadline for marriage, kids and all of this and the white picket fence and stuff. But for me, like, I just feel personally as an individual, my life is a little bit different, and I love it that way. And I love just not having the pressure of worrying about my female timeline in terms of, you know, reproduction and having kids, because I have frozen my eggs. So whether you are someone who is about to start chemotherapy and you're being presented with this option from your doctors of, do you want to freeze your eggs? Hopefully I gave you a little bit of an insight, if you did say yeah, what that would look like. If you are someone who is, you know, in the 30s and going for it with their career, you know, super happy single, super happy with a partner, traveling the world, like wanting to put yourself first still, but also considering like the option of freezing your eggs. I hope this has helped you in some way too, just like, you know, bring a little bit of insight. I wanted to share my top 3 tips to help anyone else who's thinking about going through fertility treatment or who's currently on that journey. Tip number 1 is drink a ton of water, like double the amount that you usually drink, because your body's going through so much. You are literally creating eggs inside of you, and, you know, doing this ovarian stimulation is so important to drink a lot of water. Number 2 is just eat really healthy, because again, your body's going through a lot. You really want to make sure these eggs are the healthiest they can possibly be. So eat healthy, get the vitamins in. Make some juices. I love juices because it's just such a quick and easy way to get all those like good nutrients for your body. And also eating healthy is so good for recovery after the egg retrieval. You know, your body goes through so much, and then you go through this operation of extracting the eggs, and then your body's got nothing to grow anymore. So it needs that like nourishment and love post egg retrieval. So I'd recommend eating healthy. And number 3 is probably going to sound like the most obvious thing in the world, but just rest up. Listen to your body. Don't push it. Like, rest when you need to. You know, your body's going into this like stimulation phase to like produce all these follicles in your ovaries to then produce eggs. It's all happening in a certain time frame, and so it's something out of the ordinary. So just listen to your body, rest up, nourish it, drink lots of water. Thank you so much again if you have stayed to the end of this episode. I hope you found it helpful, and if you have any questions on fertility or chemo or cancer, and if you're just looking for a friend to kind of chew the ear off and express how you're feeling, then literally you can send us a DM on Instagram at @FTheNoise_, or you can comment on the YouTube link. I'm so glad to have you guys as part of this amazing cancer community where we're just rephrasing how we talk about cancer, making it easier to understand, more approachable, bringing up the topics that no one tells you and talks about. So it's great to have you as part of the community, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye for now.